Victorian art often looks medieval at first glance, especially Pre-Raphaelite works. But how close are they really to the Middle Ages? Stick around! By the end of this video, you'll spot the differences instantly. The Middle Ages, spanning roughly from the 5th to the 15th century, was a period in Europe marked by feudal society, religious influence, and distinctive artistic, cultural, and social traditions. In Victorian art, that is to say in Britain during the reign of Queen Victoria, more or less the 19th century, medieval themes held a strong appeal for several reasons. The Middle Ages were seen as a time of moral clarity, heroic deeds, and spiritual devotion, which contrasted with the rapid industrialization and social changes of this era. Artists were drawn to its rich visual language, knights, castles, religious scenes, and courtly love as a way to evoke nostalgia, moral storytelling, and aesthetic beauty. Medieval subjects also allowed Victorian painters to experiment with color, detail, and symbolism while connecting their work to a sense of history and tradition that resonated with contemporary audiences. In painting, there were two main groups of artists who explored medieval themes: the Pre-Raphaelites, who sought to revive the detail, color, and moral intensity of the late Middle Ages and early Renaissance, roughly the 13th and 15th centuries, before Raphael and the High Renaissance. And secondly, numerous academic painters who tackled historical, religious, or literary subjects with a polished, narrative-driven style. These academic artists were not part of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. However, they worked within the same London artistic context and shared certain subjects, including medieval themes and a strong focus on color and narrative. Medieval art mainly depicts religious themes, saints, biblical scenes, moral lessons, and formal portraits, highlighting status and hierarchy. Everyday life and courtly activities also appear occasionally. Medieval garments, worn at the time, are represented in manuscripts, tomb sculptures, and paintings. Victorian artists, in contrast, draw from literature, poetry, and mythology, featuring Arthurian legends, Shakespearean scenes, or allegorical stories, with subjects that are personal, romantic, and symbolic for the Pre-Raphaelites, and presented in a more polished, narrative-driven style for academic painters. First, it's worth noting that the clothing shown in these paintings mostly reflects the elite or upper classes, not what ordinary people would have worn. Medieval fashion followed strict social codes and was shaped by climate and available materials. It reflected hierarchy, function, and modesty. In the 19th century, artists reinvented medieval fashion freely, without its original constraints, inspired by a romantic vision of the Middle Ages. Victorian painters used medieval and early Renaissance imagery, but without access to real garments, they relied on costume books or created imaginative hybrids, so the clothes look medieval-inspired rather than historically accurate. It's actually interesting to link this with the contemporary artistic dress movement, which favored loose, flowing garments as a way to break from strict Victorian fashion and emphasize beauty and ideals. Medieval portraits are often stiff, emphasizing status, power, morality, and identity. The medieval silhouette is structured and layered, sometimes heavy, and changes over the centuries. On the contrary, Pre-Raphaelite figures are more relaxed and expressive, with fluid, elongated shapes, soft lines, and loose fits that convey emotion and evoke nature, sensuality, and timeless beauty. Academic painters depicted medieval subjects with smooth idealized figures, careful lighting, and clean narrative compositions. Both Pre-Raphaelite and academic Victorian paintings sometimes mix elements from different historical periods within the same scene. Whether intentional or not, the focus in both cases is on aesthetics, mood, and storytelling rather than strict historical accuracy. In medieval times, hair was mostly covered or restrained with veils, wimples, or headdresses, though some paintings show women with their hair loose, usually to signal youth, beauty, or special occasions. Victorian painters, on the other hand, favored long flowing hair, almost never covered. In medieval paintings, light is usually symbolic rather than naturalistic. It highlights important figures or divine presence. often coming from an unspecified source, with little concern for realistic shadows or depth. Color and gold are also used to convey radiance and hierarchy. In Victorian academic painting, light is also often symbolic, intended to highlight the figures or composition, with little concern for realism, which is similar to the treatment of light in medieval paintings. Pre-Raphaelite paintings, by contrast, aim for naturalistic lighting, with careful attention to how light falls, enhances textures, like light fabrics, soft drapery, sometimes semi-transparent, prioritizing visual beauty over realism, and creates atmosphere, adding emotional and visual depth to the scene. Among the famous medieval artists, we can notably mention those who inspired the Pre-Raphaelites. In Italy, late medieval and early Renaissance painters like Giotto, Cimabue, and Duccio are admired for their narrative clarity, vibrant color, and devotional intensity. In Northern Europe, particularly in the Netherlands, Flanders, and Germany, artists such as Jan van Eyck and the Limburg brothers inspired the Pre-Raphaelites with their attention to detail, rich textures, and symbolic complexity. Regarding the Pre-Raphaelites, some of the most famous artists include Dante Gabriel Rossetti, the leader of the movement, John Everett Millay, William Holman Hunt, Edward Burne-Jones, and Ford Madox Brown, and later John William Waterhouse. Among Victorian painters inspired by medieval themes, notable examples include Edmund Blair Leighton and Frank Dixie. If you want to go further, check the description for more artist names. In short, the main differences. Medieval painting is codified, stylized, and mostly religious, with flat, hierarchical figures reflecting status, morality, and social order. Victorian academic painting shares some of this formal, idealized approach, with polished, narrative-driven compositions, while Pre-Raphaelite painting is more detailed, naturalistic, expressive, and highly aestheticized, often inspired by literature, mythology, or historical themes. All three medieval art, Victorian academic painting, and Pre-Raphaelite works had a strong visual impact, and their artists influenced later generations, leaving a lasting mark on art history. What are we checking out next time? Suggest the next topic in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss anything. Thanks for watching.